Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Makers Experts Cafe. I'm your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer. Today with me, I have an amazing human being, a person that has been in our community for a while, very heart-centered, and very proud to introduce him, Dr. Mort Orman. Dr. Mort, did I say that correctly? I just want to make sure.
Absolutely correctly. Yes. Thank
Very
you
good.
very much. Thank you for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Dr. Mort, can you tell our audience members a little bit more about what you do and how you got involved doing what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, by training, I'm an internal medicine doctor. So I've been medicine doctor for 50 years, but 40 of those years I've been helping people eliminate anger and stress from their lives. So very early on, I discovered that anger management and stress management were not very helpful to me in dealing with my own anger and stress as a young physician. And I got fortunately got some insights into how to get rid of a lot of my anger and get rid of a lot of my stress. And I saw that there weren't many people teaching that. There are a lot of people teaching how to manage your anger and stress, but very few people teaching, how you can actually get rid of it and live without it. And so I started doing that once I discovered some secrets for myself. I started giving seminars and workshops, and I've been doing that and writing books. I've been doing that for over 40 years. And I'm particularly focused on helping people, particularly married couples, eliminate anger from their relationships so they don't end up divorced and they don't cause problems for their kids with anger issues and emotional issues and stuff like that.
Right. Now, I can see how anger is something that can cascade into all aspects of your life, affect your career, affect your relationships, things like that. But I also know that there are definitely physiologic things that happen in your body.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about that as well, as far as what are some of the problems that can arise from this?
Well, obviously, as a physician, I saw a lot of health consequences. When you're a doctor, as you know, you can tell the people who are really angry, and unhappy, and a lot of other people aren't. And you follow them over time. You see what happens to them, and you tend to notice if you're practicing for a while, the angry people tend to have more illnesses. They have bad things happen to them more often. They get divorced more often. Their businesses fail more often. They get in accidents or addicted. There's all these consequences of just having a lot of emotional issues that you don't know how to control very well. And people turn various ways to try and deal with them, many of which are not very good and cause problems in themselves. So being a doctor, seeing it in my patients, and then experiencing my own difficulties in controlling my own emotions, and then realizing, well, this is what happens to people when they don't, and I don't know how to control mine, so I better figure this out. Otherwise, this train is kind of headed for me if I don't do something. So that was my motivation to kind of keep digging in there and not give up the fight of trying to figure out how to do it. Because this was the one thing I was pretty successful in, just about everything I turned my mind to. This was the one thing I could not, when I was younger, I could not succeed at. I could not control my anger. I could not defeat my anger. And it really bothered me because I kept trying and nothing happened, nothing worked. And I almost gave up, but fortunately I didn't.
Right. Now, Dr. Moore, you're mentioning something that is really foundational, which is the fact that we're not trying to suppress or we say anger is bad because it's a genuine human feeling,
Yeah.
but managing your emotion, regulating yourself, if you can't do that, it hijacks your fight or flight system, which ultimately hijacks your entire physiology.
Yeah.
So that is foundational. And so where do we start on something like this? This is something that, especially in nowadays, where you seem to see people that have less and less patience and tolerance for anything that's outside of their
Yeah,
expectations.
well, we see it in our day-to-day lives, but look what's playing out in the Middle East.
Right.
Look what's playing out, in Ukraine and Russia. I mean, those are the real extremes of what happens to anger. But we go to war in our own family sometimes, with our kids, with our partners, and with ourselves. You can be at war with yourself, be angry at yourself a lot, and frustrated with yourself. So it's not just in those distant lands that we have a problem with anger. We really have a huge problem just wherever we are, because it's, like you say, it's a basic human emotion, but we're not really educated really well. And there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about anger that keep people stuck when they don't have to be.
Yeah. And oftentimes you see other cofactors like depression and anxiety because people are taking this feeling and projecting it backwards or forwards. and you're ending up with, self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes.
right? So, all right. So that being said, where do we start with this? Because it's very pervasive. It could be insidious.
Well,
Um,
I think the problem is a lack of good education because, like I say, there's lots of myths that run around and that keep people trapped. One of the big myths, as you sort of alluded to it, is that we think that there's only two ways to deal with anger. You either express it or you suppress it. And we know both of them, they have their pros and their cons, but both of them can cause problems. People don't realize there's a third way to deal with anger, and that's to just make it go away, just eliminate it. But you have the ability whenever you start to get angry, say, okay, I know where that anger is coming from. I can see where it's coming from. I can look at those causes and I go, oh, wait a minute, something's off here, something's off there. Boom, the anger's gone. Now I have nothing to worry about. Do I express it or suppress it because it isn't there anymore? And we've all had that experience. We've all had moments when we've been angry about something and we get a new piece of information that shows us that whatever we were thinking was wrong. And as soon as we find that out, it's like, oh, I'm not angry anymore. I now see it. I see it in a different light, and now I'm not angry. So we all know that you can make anger disappear just by changing your perspective and or getting some new information. But that's not being taught as a strategy. Like that's like the best strategy if you know how to do it. Yeah.
I always love it when somebody comes in and says, it's not black, it's not white, it's something else. And they give a completely different. So I love this.
Yeah.
All right. So awareness, mindset shift, and
Yep.
perfect. So the next question I have on this is that many of us have these patterns, habits, things that have become wired in.
Yes, absolutely.
And how do you address that? Because to change something, you have to change first. So
That's mostly what I address. I show people how the way they've been wired to see things and to react to things, it's internal. It's they think most people, and here's the second myth. We think that's the external events that we observe that we don't like or that we think are bad or wrong or something. We think that's directly causing our anger in our bodies. It's not. It's a trigger, but what's really causing the anger is the wiring that we have developed over our lifetimes and the culture has given us and our families have given us, that causes us to see things in certain patterns, in certain ways, automatically, instantaneously, without any thinking. It's just clicks in. We see it a certain way and we get angry. And we don't realize that the way we're seeing it could be off. We could be missing something or making a wrong assumption or missing a crucial piece of information. And when you don't have the full picture, you can be angry for a bad reason, thinking that you've got a good reason to be angry because we believe that if we're angry, it tells us we're right about whatever it is we're angry about. And what I found in my own life, which was a surprise, is most of the time I was angry when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s. When I look back on it now, most of the time I was wrong about something that was making me angry, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I thought I was right.
right.
And that's what really sticks people, because it's hard to question your automatic programming when your emotion is telling you that you're right. And the truth is actually, in many cases, the opposite.
Yeah. I love what you just said, Dr. Mort, because I know from neuroscience that oftentimes we have a certain feeling and then our brain looks to our environment for proof of why it feels a certain way.
Yes.
So
it'll come up with a story. It'll come up with a story
exactly,
to explain why.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
It's funny. Elizabeth, Lisa Elizabeth Barrett is one of like the premier brain scientists, emotion researchers, and she wrote a book called How Emotions Are Made, and she talks about this. And she shared an example of how she was a PhD student or something, and she was working all the time, didn't have time to date. So finally, somebody convinced her to go out on a date. So she goes out on this date with a guy, and she wasn't attracted to him that much, but she started having these like butterflies and these sensations in her body. And she said, wow, I must be more attracted to this guy than I than I thought I was. And then she goes home and she starts having nausea and diarrhea, and she had like a stomach virus. But in that moment, your body created this story of, oh, you're really attracted to this guy. It's why you feel that way.
I have butterflies. Exactly. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I hear this all the time from experts, especially those that are dealing with the younger generations. that they want to make the kids more resilient. And you talked about, that whole processing and how you interpret the
Yes,
stimuli,
yes.
that it doesn't necessarily have to be that A leads to B. Uh, and in fact, many times they have nothing to do with one another.
Well, there's always the interpretations, and that's what the next big myth we have is, again, we think anger is a 1-2 process. Whatever you're looking at directly causes the emotion in your body. It's actually a 4-step process. There's 2 steps going on inside of us that are automatic, that come from our conditioning. The first is that we look at the event through certain filters, very well-defined filters, and each emotion has its own set of filters. The cognitive behavioral scientists have sort of figured this stuff out.
Right.
There's specific ways of looking at things that'll give you anger, a different way will give you anxiety, a different way will give you guilt, worry, different things. And then automatically our body tells us that what we're seeing is not filtered reality, it's true. We're
Mhm.
seeing reality the way it really is, when in fact it's filtered, and we don't notice that there's a difference,
Right.
and that the filters can distort the truthfulness of what we're looking at. So that's where we really get tripped up. Our bodies and our brains play tricks on us.
Okay.
One of the things I say is most people don't realize our own brains and bodies create more fake news every day than the media
All the me-
has ever done. Okay, we're constantly generating fake news and buying it as if it's true to ourselves,
yeah, I
and
love
that's where a lot of the anger comes from,
I love it.
as well as other emotions, some other emotions as well too.
So Dr. Mort, especially because at Role Model Maker, we're really passionate about role modeling proper behavior for the benefit of the next generation, if not for our own,
Yeah.
say, survival, right? And what I wanted to ask you is, for those people who keep getting tripped up by this feeling of anger, what would be the one tip or 1 or 2 tips that you have that could be implemented right away from this conversation?
Yeah, well, I can give you the main tip. It's hard to implement without some help, but I can give you the main tip. And the thing that made a difference for me, when I went from being a really angry guy in my 20s and 30s with very little hope of ever being different. I mean, I thought that was just my personality, just the way I was always going to be, to where the last 40 years of my life, I've had very little anger, and I made some important changes to do that. When I look back, one of the main things I realized, like I told you, is that a lot of the times when I was angry, I was wrong and I didn't know it. I didn't feel it. I didn't know it. I actually felt the opposite. So
Mhm.
the most powerful tip is to not be afraid of being wrong, to not consider it a sin or something horrible. As a doctor, that was one of the hardest things that I
Ah,
had to accept, because we're trained
right,
to never be wrong as much as possible. You
right,
get 7 years, for me, 7 years of training,
right,
and every day it's don't be wrong, don't be wrong, don't be wrong, don't be
right.
wrong. So
You get penalized for being wrong.
yeah, yeah. So that's fine. It made me into a good physician. Okay, that's what you want from your physician. You don't want
Right,
to be wrong. But when I go home in my personal life, in my relationships,
right,
or other things, dealing with myself and my emotions, being wrong is like the greatest thing you can embrace, because we're biologically designed to be wrong a lot of the time,
right,
and we don't know it. And if you can be comfortable with considering that you may be wrong, and then start looking at where your automatic reactions may have taken you in a wrong direction, you can figure out how to get rid of a lot of that emotional baggage, some of which people have been carrying around for years.
right.
I had one example, one patient of mine who was angry at his parents for 40 years. He had one interaction with his mother at my request, completely eliminated his anger. He found out that he was completely mistaken about what his parents were doing and what their motivations were. That
Wow.
he had assumed since he was 5 years old, something that happened that he blamed them for. And when he finally went to his mother and asked her, "What were you guys feeling at that time? Why did you do what you did?" And she explained it to him. He went like, "Oh, well, that makes sense. I had it all wrong," and he felt terrible that he had carried that anger around for 40 years.
That's
And
really powerful. I
yeah,
think it goes back to self-acceptance as well, especially if you are success or achievement oriented, or that was a common theme
yeah,
for you growing up, becomes really, really important. Number one, to be able to accept yourself if you make mistakes,
yeah.
so that it's okay for you to be able to admit that to yourself.
Yeah, and
And
I think that's part of self-acceptance, not only just your strengths, but also how you're programmed
right,
to be fallible, how you're programmed to have biases, how you're programmed to automatically think and see things in certain ways that are going to lead you down the wrong path.
Right.
And that's just part of being human. And you should forgive yourself and appreciate yourself that you and everybody else have
Right.
those same tendencies. It's just a matter of, can you quickly correct? Can you admit when you're wrong and quickly correct for it?
Yeah. And this has repercussions for your kids that are watching you and learning from that behavior, and that's
Yeah.
becoming their intrinsic characters. So,
Yeah, that's why I'm so interested in helping parents
mhm,
um, learn how to stop getting angry at each other.
right.
Because when their kids don't see their parents fighting with each other all the time and being hostile towards each other, demeaning towards each other, they don't pick up those habits as easily, and they realize that you can live life and not have it be, not have relationships all be about fighting and arguing, which unfortunately a lot of people think that's what they're for. It's almost I call it the 007 effect. It's like people think like their marriage license is like a license to kill. To kill, not to kill the person, but to kill
Right.
the relationship. So they'll do things that are stupid. If you really want to have a good relationship, they'll criticize their partner, they'll blame their partner, they'll find fault with their partner. It's like they have a license to kill their marriage, and that's not that's not what you should do with a marriage license. You should be accepting of people's quirks and their differences and their foibles, and appreciate them despite that, and let go of that need, constantly point out, when they do things wrong or do stupid things, which we all do, you know.
Awesome. Well, for all of you MI6 people out there that have that license, Dr. Mort, I know that this is one of those topics that the more you describe it, then you go into it, the more these fibers start coming out, and it's beautiful and fulfilling to actually pull it apart and be able to resolve it. But how can people find out more about you? I know that, like you said at the beginning, support is a big part of this. This
Yes.
is not something that you just go in tomorrow. It's like, okay, well, that's it. I'm done, because it's wired into you. So how can people find out more about you, your resources, and connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a free handout that I make available to people. It's called the best anger elimination method you can find. It talks about the anger elimination method that I developed 40 years ago and that I'm teach people how to use ever since, and
Wow.
I'm teaching now. And it's a short read, and you can get it. You can go to the URL theangersolution.org and download it. That'll also get you on my email list. I discuss a topic each week related to anger or stress, break it into 3 parts, and deliver it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I've been doing that since 2011, and a lot of people have been with
Awesome.
me since that time, so they enjoy those emails. So you get on the email list, and it also, in that report, it tells you how to get in touch with me by email if you want to. If you want to discuss this further, or discuss any anger issues you might
Awesome.
have
I
further,
love it.
happy to do that with people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really generous of you to offer the gift. And guys, very, very recommended. I highly encourage you to connect, look for support, role model that behavior, that it's okay to ask for support, that you don't have to have all the answers to the kids, and that the world is not a big bad place. That's, there are genuine people interested in making it a better place, wanting to support people. So please connect with Dr. Mort, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, connect with us as well, so you get notifications of all the experts that come on the channel, share their gifts and expertise, such as Dr. Mort, and then we'll go from there. Fascinating topic, Dr. Mort. Any final words before we finish today?
Yeah, I just think my message, my constant message for the last 40 years about anger is, don't feel like, if you're angry, if you have anger issues, don't feel like you're stuck with them. Don't feel like it's just part of who you are and it's always going to be that way. There are ways to understand anger better, and there are ways to be able to get your hands on the controls so that anger doesn't drag you around. You actually are able to, be in control of your anger when you want to be. And sometimes, like you say, anger can be useful. With kids, sometimes you need to emphasize things, or you're managing people, or you're in the military, or who knows what. Sometimes anger has its appropriate place, but a lot of times it causes more problems than we need, and we would really have a better life if we could know how to get rid of it when we wanted to. And it's
Absolutely.
definitely possible. I haven't met anybody who had a normal functioning brain that was unable to do this. It just takes the right orientation and
Well, we said.
support to be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. A message of hope that has withstood the test of time, 40 years. So I
Yep,
appreciate you doing what you do,
yep,
and we look forward to having you in the community more.
yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.